welcome to Chamber Chatter. I'm Melissa Candelaria, your host, and of course, joining me for this edition is Melanie Fraser with the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce and Scott McCammon with Milton Chamber. Thank you both once again for joining us on Chamber Chatter.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Well, lots to talk about since the last time we met. Having said that, though, I think we can't really ignore this election. It's the federal election has been called. It's pretty much going to dominate our lives in the next several weeks. What I wanted to get a sense of you from both of you first is to talk about what each individual business community or what you've seen in your business community and what matters to them for this election. So let's start with you, Melanie. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the business community in terms of what they're worried about, what they're looking for in the candidates this time around?
Yeah, I think the primary theme we're getting from our local businesses, Melissa, is that people don't want this election. I think we all feel that we're firmly still in the middle of a pandemic as we're thick into a fourth wave, and our businesses are feeling like there's more things to worry about and bigger things to worry about than a federal election. That being said, we are of course 2 weeks away from Election Day, and we're still hearing the same themes that we did 2 years ago in 2019. So we're looking at better access to labor. We struggle in Halton Hills to get some skilled labor in certain areas. So we do have our businesses that are looking to see what kind of programs come with that. Broadband is a big issue for Halton Hills because we do have pockets that businesses that can't access internet at a level that makes them efficient, and it's even more of an issue now that we've come through a pandemic where people are working from home and they rely on internet even more. And then we're hearing from our businesses they want to have a real conversation about what the next 10, 20 years looks like as far as debt reduction, how we're managing the deficit, and what do taxes look like. So it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of things that are coming at the federal candidates.
What about for you, Scott?
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same as what Melanie talked about. Everyone's concerned. There's a double-edged sword, right? Because everyone needed the subsidies to make it through the pandemic, and so we're all very thankful for the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, everything that the government's been able to do. But that said, I mean, it's a huge amount of debt that's been piled on. So people are very curious about how we're eventually going to pay that down. At the same time, as Melanie talked about broadband, that in Milton is a big issue as well. As much as people think that we're all urban in Milton, we do have near urban with Campbellville and Nassau. We've got rural, and people kind of forget that it's not just businesses that need it. The pandemic proved that homeowners need it as well, but farmers rely on internet. The technology in tractors and things like that is beyond our imagination, and so broadband and access to internet is huge. I would add on to that infrastructure generally. Milton is still expanding, so we're looking at how governments can support growth for us, particularly with the business growth. And tied into that is going to be transit, and especially the transit links between municipalities. Melanie talked about the shortage of labor. It's acute, and a lot of the people that need to be working in Milton don't have access to vehicles, so they need public transit, and they need it to come from places like Mississauga and Brampton to Milton.
Well, that's certainly true. And, there has been or have been recent announcements in the past few months, like the federal government, the Liberal government had announced funding for more broadband. And in fact, also announced when you were talking about transit there, Scott, the expansion of the Milton Go, that they were going to help fund that. Having said that, though, hearing those announcements, was there anything else, maybe from the different parties or Conservatives or NDPs, Greens, what have you, that in their platform that they released that touches on some of these issues that you were talking about in order to kind of expand our broadband, expand our business, debt reduction, anything in particular that you had seen that the other party members had announced?
I think, Melissa, for us, when we look at the party platforms, well, first of all, the Liberals haven't released a platform. I think they're dripping it down day by day. And a lot of that is getting lost in the noise of other things that are happening within the campaign. I know the NDP are advocating for a $20 minimum wage. So that's something that we're looking at. I mean, obviously, we need healthy communities, and part of that is a living wage, but that impacts the burdens on local business. And then the challenge with the Conservative platform is that it's not fully costed. So I think that with such a short election and in a time where people aren't really paying attention, it's hard to really drive down to the issues that are mattering, are going to matter to our local businesses. So, it's up to us to go through the platforms when they're released and try to find the things that matter to business. I know Scott can probably comment to this because he's been around in the chamber world a little longer than I have. But the challenge is these promises are made and then they don't actually come to fruition, or they're 10 or 15 years down the road. So businesses need support now, and they need to see how they're going to impact them on a short-term basis.
So the gray hair is showing. Is that what you're saying? Melanie's right. I mean, the problem is that there's a huge amount of skepticism right now in terms of why we need the election, but also just the rhetoric, and it's easy to make promises during an election, and it's easier to have kind of one party say one thing and the other party counter with something else. But how much of that is meaningful once they're elected. I think. I think it's easy to make promises. It's harder to govern. So I'll be more interested in whichever party gets elected, how they form the government, what they choose to do, and that's where the chambers have a big role to play, because we can either be lobbying for new things that we think make more sense than what they may have promised, or if we like what they promised, making sure that they in fact do it.
It's interesting you brought up that point. I mean, you're right. It is such a short election. Even in the best of times, when we get a proper campaign time, proper is probably the wrong term that I'm using, but a more traditional campaign time, we have the time to sit down. Businesses have the time to sit down to look at each platform. So with this, and then also businesses trying to deal with their own issues back home in terms of vaccine passports and getting back on their feet in this COVID thing, is there a sense of kind of being pulled in all sorts of directions? Like, is the business community or people that you've talked to a little afraid of making a rash decision, considering it's such a short time period to make a huge decision like who our next government is going to be?
So my big concern is that people will decide that they just don't have the time to make the decision, and so they just won't vote. And I think that's a mistake. I think everyone still has to exercise their right to vote, but that's a huge concern for me, is just the amount of voter turnout.
Yeah, I think the challenge to Melissa is that when I reach out to our businesses looking for questions for our upcoming debate, for example, tell me what matters to you, I ask them. And a lot of the stuff that's coming in my email, they're actually more personal, not business related so much. And it just goes to show that, just like you said, people are just living day to day. They're just trying to get their businesses up and running, and our normal has changed. And that's where people's focus is. They want to make sure that the communities are safe and healthy, and that they've got the right government leading them through that. But to Scott's point, I mean, I think a lot of people are actually not going to be inspired to vote this election. So it is a danger.
And I would add too that there's always a big challenge of the different levels of government, right? So I think even though we're having a federal election, people may be talking about issues that are of concern that are provincial or municipal or regional in scope. So it's a challenge to keep educated on all of the issues.
Yeah, and I mean, it could get confusing because some cross over, and as to which jurisdiction is what, and we do have a provincial one set for next year and a municipal one election set for next year, so definitely a busy time. In our last few minutes before we had to break, though, you touched on it, Melanie. Let's talk about this. We've got our all candidates debates or all candidates forum coming up, and you touched on a little bit of what people are concerned about. Can you, both of you, go into a little more detail as to what we should expect in these debates and what you're hoping will happen?
Well, we have 5 active candidates within Wellington Halton Hills. And one of the challenges we find in Halton Hills is that our riding is quite large, so geographically. So our candidates have to really balance the more suburban issues. We've got some manufacturing issues, access to capital, but we're also very much a rural riding that actually encircles Guelph. So we are partnering with the Centre Wellington Chamber of Commerce so that we can have a really fulsome discussion about the issues that are facing our riding. I'm hearing from my members, I've touched on this before, access to labor. They want to see, what access to capital looks like on a go-forward basis. A lot of the issues that came up during this pandemic was the access to funding had to be personally guaranteed. So we do have a lot of smaller businesses within Halton Hills that simply can't take that on. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation, but I think that there will be a lot of conversation that pops up around what Scott was referencing, the CERB and access to other programs as well.
Scott, 2 minutes.
Yeah, with any debate, I just want new ideas. I want fresh thinking. I want people to act as leaders and just not debate for the sake of debate, right? So I don't want to, a he said, she said kind of an approach and just not getting to the root of the issue. So, hopefully, with the debate on your TV, we have meaningful discussion and help inform the voters.
Note something, Scott. I thought it was really interesting. The Green Party candidate in our riding, he's really running on a different tact. He's saying, listen, we don't have a party whip, so I'll be able to vote for what is important to Halton Hills, Wellington Halton Hills. And I thought that was really interesting, to your point, that lots of people at the debates, they just speak to their platforms and there aren't fresh ideas. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm looking forward to conversation about that.
And what the big fear is too, in the remaining seconds, we might get another minority government, whichever party, which means you could have a non-confidence vote very quickly, and we're going back to another election.
Oh, wow. And that'll be a time, right? Let's hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, and as you said, I guess it'll hopefully these debates that we are going to host and the Chamber, Wellington Halton Hills as well, helps people get there, because it is what you said does sound a little depressing, in my opinion, of people not wanting to go and vote. So hopefully this helps them do that. On that note, we are going to take a short break right here. On the other side, though, we're going to talk about things that are happening now. COVID, vaccine passport, all of that fun stuff. We'll be right back after this.